Hi folks, my name's Steve and today we are looking at Bretwalda. This is currently crowdfunding over on gamefound, so we're going to take a look at the game, some of the core mechanics, and see if it's a game you should be back in or whether it's one you can pass on. So let's take a little bit of a look at the basics of the game and some of the core mechanics. So this is a dudes on a map area control kind of a game. You're going to be taking control of one of these four kingdoms and you're going to be expanding your influence across the map, trying to grab these dalks, which are going to be essentially victory points for you. Some other ways to get victory points from these chronicle cards as well, but essentially, you know, we're taking control. We're going to push back our enemy and get as much control of the board as we can. So the game is played over 12 rounds or seasons, and each round we're going to get a couple of actions and we can't repeat these actions. So let's just quickly go through the flow of play and I'll talk a little bit more about those actions. So we start by drawing a season card. I'll talk more about those in a little bit, but essentially they're kind of events that are going to dictate some of the way that you might play. And then we've got the action phase, which is the bulk of the game, where we're going to take our two actions. And then we've got the priority phase, just clean up and working out who's first player for the next round. So let's take a look at those actions. So first up, so again, what you're going to do is, depending on which action you want out of these four, you're going to pick that, place it down there, and then player's going to pass once you've done your action. But essentially this is to remind you which action you've done, because you can't do the same action twice. So let's kind of go through the actions and tell you a little bit more about them. So first up, we've got the development. So this is where we're going to basically be upgrading our technology and knowledge base. So we've got essentially 2 slots for each action, and we're going to be augmenting that action in some way. So if we just take a quick look at some of these, this allows us to build any number of buildings in your action. Typically you can only build one building. I'll take a look at some of those buildings in a minute, but this allows you to build multiple buildings if you've got the cash for it. Monastery schools, the cost of the knowledge tile is reduced to 1, so instead of paying the usual price, we're just paying 1. Let's have a look at some of these others. And again, what you're going to do is you're going to pick the one you want and you're going to place it here. So we might have this one, which during collection you receive an extra 2 coins. I'll talk about collection in a minute. And then we might have this one as well, which locks us out of the tax collectors, for instance. But we're going to kind of do some of these upgrades as we go through the game to augment these basic actions. So that's the develop. Along with that as well, we can also build buildings. So I'll quickly skip over here, but again, there are extra ways to kind of tailor your gameplay. So abbeys, we can place some abbeys onto the various locations that we can control, and I believe these give us extra dalks if we've got enough of these controlled. Granaries obviously give us access to extra food, and then mead halls give us some other benefits. So there's 4 different buildings, and again, this is all part of that development action. So if we wanted to do that, we might pop our token there, we do our development action, and then play would pass. So collection, this is where we're going to get some cash, and we're going to generate some food onto the board. So interestingly with this, when we're getting cash, so essentially what we do is we look at locations we control. So this one generates us 2 cash, and it's got a food token here. So when we get cash, we're just going to add it into our personal kind of supply, but food stays on the board, and we're going to have to kind of pay that food in winter, which I quite like that idea, but I'll talk more about what I like and don't like about the game a little bit later. But that's essentially collection. And then we've got this recruit action. I'm not going to try and pronounce the actual Old English term for it. I believe that's like feared or something, but yeah, you tell me in the comment section down below. There's plenty of opportunities to butcher some of this Old English. But yeah, this is essentially recruit action, where we're going to recruit units into our cities and ports, and we've got kind of like 3 tiers of unit, if you like. Let's just have a look over here. So we've got our little guys, then you know we've got our increase in size, and these are all, and we also have got ships as well. that we're going to add into the C locations. So there's 5 C locations dotted around the board. I'll talk more about movement in a minute, but essentially recruiting is going to be adding new units onto the board. And then we've got movement. So movement, we're going to be granted movement points, and you'll notice some of these locations have got like thicker borders, thinner borders, so this will cost us 1 move to get into here, whereas moving across here will cost us 2 movement points because it's got this thicker border. So that's going to represent like your rough terrain and things like that. So that's movement. So essentially, you know, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be moving out our units across the board and trying to get control of these other areas, ideally focusing on these dalks, because these are going to bring in victory points as the game progresses. So we're going to be moving up this victory point track and trying to get to, well, player dependent essentially, but so in a 3-player game you're trying to get to six dalks. There are some other ways to get dalks. We've got these cards here. They're essentially objective cards, and abbeys as well. If we can control abbeys on the board, that's also going to generate some dalks. This is the kind of game where as soon as the victory point criteria is met, the game instantly ends. So it's not like you have to hold on to those victory points for a round. It's just going to automatically end when you hit that. There is player elimination in the game, but that also triggers the end game. So it's kind of like a light player elimination, where if you do end up out the game's going to be over pretty quickly after. If you can't hit this victory point mark, you're just going to play out the 12 rounds and then see who is furthest up that track. So that's kind of how that all works. But yeah, essentially you're moving around these locations, trying to get control. Within movement, when you do move into an area controlled by a neutral or an enemy player, like an opposing player, that is what is going to trigger combat. And combat is essentially opposed rolls. So we're at the combat dice over here. Let's grab these, bring those down here. So essentially you're going to look at what units you've got in the combat, and that's going to dictate your dice pool, and then your opponent's going to look at what units they've got, and that's going to dictate their dice pool. The cool thing about combat is there are quite a lot of these lordship cards which you're going to get to play in the combat phase, which are going to augment combat. But essentially, you know, we're going to be kind of rolling our dice, potentially playing some of these cards if they are used. So this one right here, Spy Behind the Walls. Before a battle, when you attack a city area, cancel the defender's dice bonus from the city during this battle. So these are going to kind of have quite a strong influence on combat, which I quite like. It adds an extra element to combat where you're kind of playing these cards and potentially augmenting your dice or getting benefits off these blank faces and things like that. So it's not just a flat dice roll, but essentially on these dice are really simple. We've got like blank faces, we've got shields, this symbol here, and then we've got swords, this symbol here, and swords are going to inflict 1 damage, shields are going to defend 1 damage, and you're just going to kind of do a little bit of maths, work out how much damage you're doing to your opponent, depending on the size of your units. They have different health values. I'll talk more about the kind of leader unit, but essentially our larger units have got kind of 2 and 3 health, so they're not necessarily going to be taken out in one combat. For combat you resolve 2 rounds as well, so you do 1 round of combat. If no one's taken out, you're going to go into a 2nd round of combat. If you're the attacker, you can choose to kind of retreat and things like that, and if you haven't wiped out the enemy after the 2nd round, you're going to be retreating anyway. So nice and smooth combat. I'll talk more about what we like and what we don't like about the combat in a little bit, but that's how combat is resolved basically. pop those up there. Close enough. So that's kind of the ebb and flow of the game. Probably worth talking about these 3 cards we've got here. Each kingdom is kind of asymmetrical. You start with a kind of personal benefit. So this blue kingdom, you may recruit 1 additional land unit in each area, but obviously everyone's got their own. And you also have your lord. So here's our lord over here. And you have 3 cards with the lord, and they all act slightly differently. So let's just flip over another 1 or 2 here. I'll pop those up there. And essentially at the start of the game, you're going to pick which ability you want to start the game with. And this tells us kind of health, how much health, movement points, and what kind of combat dice they roll. And also then a benefit. So this first one gives us, when he fights in a city area, gain 1 shield in each round. I should say that city areas are these areas on the map with the kind of shield symbol. This specifically is blue, which denotes that this is our home city. But yeah, there are various city areas. Hereford here would not be a city area because it's not got one of those shields. But essentially this gives us some defensive benefits. This one gives us a benefit for gaining food. And then this one gives us some aggressive benefits. So it helps us kind of decide on how we're going to play and how we're going to kind of set up our strategy. And we've got 3 of these. So on top of just being kind of our strategy or our kind of asymmetrical bonuses, they're also our lives. So if we do decide to get aggressive with our leader and he ends up getting taken out, then he's going to essentially be replaced by one of these other guys. So we might now bring in this guy as our backup, for instance. So we have got some kind of protection, and you know, obviously if you're overly aggressive earlier, at least you've got the opportunity to kind of stay in the game and maybe be a little bit more cautious. So that's kind of the majority of the way you're going to be taking your actions and what you're trying to do. But essentially you're building new units and you're going to move them around the map with the intention of claiming these dalks and food and or money. And then we're going to move on to the next round. So start of the game, let's say we're going to resolve this spring. So let me rotate around just so as I can show you these, because these are quite a key part of the game. Each season we're going to draw a card. So here at the start of the game we've got spring, and this is rising spring. Pay 1 coin less for each unit recruitment. So that's a good time to be recruiting units, obviously, if you get this card. But these are obviously different. Here we've got road movement costs 2 as opposed to 1. That's what those 2 little kind of arrows are telling us. And then we move into summer, and summer is an important part of the game as well, which I'll kind of talk about in a little bit. But essentially we've got a playful summer here. Really thematic game this is. I'll talk more about what I like and don't like. If you kind of know what's going on in this game, skip ahead and find out my thoughts over there. But playful summer, roll us one of our dice, and for each roll we've got, and if the face die is blank, that unit's removed. So just a potential plague infestation. But what's also important about this is that the Danes arrive. So every summer this is going to happen. The Danes are going to arrive. Let's just flip another one over for you guys. There you go. In fact, there's the rest. So there we go. Danes arrive, and this is kind of an integral part of the game. And how this works is essentially, let me just pop these back up there. So essentially what happens is that based on where we are on this track here, so the victory point track, everyone is going to get some bonus money to bid. Well, not everyone, but there's a little bit of a catch-up mechanic happening here. So if you're out in front, you're not going to get any bonus money for bidding. But the further you are behind, so this red person will get 1, 2, 3 additional money for the bid. And essentially what we're doing is we're bidding on who is going to get to activate or place these Danes when they arrive. Because we've got this Dane deck here. We're all going to do kind of a hidden bid, with the players behind having some extra that they can bid. And this is going to dictate how many of these cards we draw and who gets to choose which one is inactive. And essentially what they do is they tell you where the Danes are going to arrive on their boat and into which city they're going to be trying to aggress onto. So this tells us where and how, and essentially this is the kind of neutral factions in this game are quite relevant. Again, I'll kind of go into more detail when I talk about what I like and don't like about the game, but if you're playing like a 3-player game, the neutral factions are all of these white pieces, the faction that isn't being played, and then these Danes that are going to arrive every summer, and then they're also going to be potentially moving in autumn, because as we move into autumn, all of these neutral units, we're going to have another round of bidding essentially. So you're going to bid for how much movement you want to spend on these neutrals. So let's say I bid 3 or 6 money or whatever I want to bid. That's going to give me access to potentially move these neutral units around the board and start causing trouble for my opponents. So really important part of the game, that is this idea of kind of bidding to not only move these Danes that are going to be attacking, but also the neutral pawns that are on the board. Getting control of those can be quite valuable. And then in winter, we've basically got some additional admin, and this is where we're going to be paying food for our units that are on the board. And that's essentially the game, guys. So let's talk about whether you should be backing. So right off the bat, hopefully you've realized this is very much a dudes on the map game, right? If you don't like this kind of game, this is not for you. You're going to be spreading across the board. You're going to be trying to take control of as much as you can. You know, you're going to be focusing on these delts, and you're going to be trying to take your opponents out. There's a lot of neutral players on the board, so there is a little bit of admin within that. It's quite fun admin, I guess. It's not too tedious, because there is some angst about getting control of the movement of the kind of non-player factions, if you like, or kingdoms. So I quite like that. I think it's well handled. It's not a kind of tedious merry-go-round of moving all of these different things. You know, you kind of feel like you're kind of bribing the factions to go and do your bidding, if you like, which kind of brings us into the theme of the game, which I think is just really well handled. The map's really nice. I think it fits the theme perfectly. These lordship cards, you know, they kind of feel like they're supposed to, right? It's all like a nice kind of old English tapestry. Same for the player boards, the italics and stuff. You're gonna have plenty of fun butchering the old English language, trying to pronounce some of these things, but I think that in itself adds a nice bit of flavor to the game. I really like the color palette. I like the artwork. You know, we've got these lovely tapestries over here. I think they've done a really good job with that. I guess it's a little bit drab, and some people might not like it, but I'm a fan of the artwork. I think it works really nicely. So yeah, going back to some of these ideas, right? It is area control. I don't think it's doing anything particularly like fresh or innovative, but it does what it does nicely, and I think it's a really cool area control game. You kind of have to be aware of several things, right? And the season cards kind of dictate a lot of what's going on. what actions you want to do in particular seasons depending on the event that occurs. You know, sometimes you're going to have movement penalties, sometimes you're going to have discounts if you do certain actions, but also these tech tiles, really smart, really clever, because they help you kind of augment your game plan and the way you want to kind of build out your engine, if you like. So you can mitigate a lot of these events, and you can put yourself in quite a good position by playing around with the tech tree, if you like. So I really like that. What else do we need to talk about? This probably isn't a solo game that I would necessarily recommend. There's no kind of AI, right? And the neutrality in a multiplayer is not as bad because we're kind of bidding on control, but without having any kind of AI, I don't think this would be a particularly fulfilling solo experience. I think it would be fine, and it's certainly a good way to learn the game, but you want to be playing this at, you know, in my opinion, 3 or 4 players. It would have been interesting or nice if they'd have explored kind of smaller maps and things like that for lower player counts, so that we just had these white neutral kingdoms in there, and the Danes. But as it is, we've got this map. Whether that changes, I'm not sure, but as far as I'm aware, this is the map we're playing on, and you're going to play with all of these pieces. And if we were playing a 2 or 3 player game, then the other colors would just be neutral players within that. What else can we talk about? These boats, I think. So movement in general, I think movement is really cool in this game, because we have the opportunity, as we kind of expand out onto the map. Let's say we've got something like this going on. We can actually, when we do movement, we can essentially pick our guys up and add them onto these boats, and then we can ferry them off around the map and drop them off at other locations potentially. So this is like, not only is it thematic, it really opens up the game. What it stops is kind of turtling up or expanding out and knowing that you've just got to protect that front line kind of thing. You know that you have to be wary of kind of sea invasions coming across and getting into your back line, which I think is really cool, because I think otherwise you'd very much be kind of turtling a kind of front line. And movement generally, just these simple things of changing the movement cost depending on what kind of terrain you're traveling through, I think works nicely. It's kind of simple but effective, because it kind of dictates how you're going to move around the map and how you're going to get to those locations you want to be in. So I think movement is very clever in this game, in that it's simple but really well executed. And yeah, it's one of those games that, like I said before, it's not particularly complex, and it's not necessarily fresh or innovative, but it is really solid. It's a very nice game. Combat is good. It's fine, right? Again, it's not super innovative. We've got different dice depending on the strength of the type of thing that we're attacking with. So you're going to be kind of creating a dice pool, which I'm not a huge fan of, right? I think that creating big dice pools, and then your opponent creates an opposing dice pool, and then we kind of do some maths, I don't think is like the best way of handling combat. But because we've got these lordship cards kind of augmenting combat and adding some extra flavor, I think it keeps the combat like interesting. I don't think the combat is the highlight of the game, but it is interesting, and I think these cards definitely help. 2 rounds of combat I think is more of a mechanical thing than anything. It's, again, I just want, in this kind of game, I want the combat to be like quick and efficient, and you know, not bog the game down, because there's other players at the table who have no interest in your dice rolls, or at least limited interest, right? And you know, again, the idea of creating dice pools generally is a little bit tedious. So I'm kind of, I would say that is a negative for me, in that it's just okay, right? It's not bad. It's and these cards certainly help combat, but it's not particularly exciting. So that's maybe something to look at. Have a look yourself and see what you think of combat. But overall, guys, this is a really good game. It's quite a high price point. I think it's around like €90 for the basic, and you're going to get plastic miniatures for these buildings. So rather than the kind of cardboard chits, you're going to actually have plastic minis, which is fine. It's you know, that's board gaming now, isn't it? Right? You know, if things can be deluxified, they are. But you know, personally, I'd rather this was kind of in that £40–50 price bracket and had cardboard chits. I'd be fine with that. So a little bit on the higher price point, but you know, I think it's generally looks like good value. Like I say, the artwork is brilliant. I'm really big fan of the artwork. I really like the style. I like the theme. I like the setting. I think the theme comes through well as well. You know, I think just the addition of these boats and getting to actually load up the boats with your units is a really cool idea. It really feels thematic. It feels like you're getting your units onto a boat and you're kind of sending them off into battle. So yeah, really like it. I think the whole game works well. I like how they've handled player elimination. I think the fact that that's going to be an end game trigger is nice. So you haven't got like one person who's, you know, gone kind of you know, gung-ho really early and end up out the game and sat watching for the next hour or so. Game length, I don't think it's going to be a massive problem. It feels like you know, it's nice and tidy. It's not, you're not pushing it into like long games. It's something you can get played in an evening, no problem. It's competing with a lot of other games. You know, there's a lot of really good area control games out there, but this is absolutely one you should check out. Really nicely done, really worth your time to take a look at, and it's probably one I'll be back in. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed it, let me know what you think in the comments. But until next time, guys, take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.